Hi, I'm Chuck Firlotte, and welcome to Heart, a podcast series on leadership brought to you from the Welch College of Business and Technology at beautiful Sacred Heart University.
Chuck Firlotte is a successful business executive, a guy who's worked very hard to get to where he is, emphasizes learning, taking care of people, and always meeting his responsibilities. He's actually a great role model for someone who wants to grow in their career. Has always wanted to do more, grow more, and make a greater contribution. And he's never ending. And you're going to have to nail his coffin shut when he dies, because he's going to want to do one more deal, for sure.
I'm Chuck Firlotte, and we're here at beautiful Sacred Heart University. Welcome to Heart, a podcast series on leadership. And today with me is Dr. George Gercken, consultant psychologist. Good morning, Dr. George.
Good morning, Chuck. How are you?
I'm just grand. Tell me a little bit about what you do.
Well, I'm a consultant who works with organizations.
You're a neuropsychologist.
Neuropsychologist by training. Did my dissertation in brainwave biofeedback and control of epileptic seizures, which has nothing to do with what I'm doing, except I learned a lot of discipline. I'm doing what I'm doing now because I had a cancer during my internship, and I was paging through the Book of Life, and I came up with a blank page, and I said, what do you really want to do? And I went to the American Psychological Association meeting in Toronto, and there were hundreds of tables. This was in the 70s, people dressed with serapes, and here's four guys sitting at a table with suits on and no beards. And so I walked over to them and said, what do you guys do? And they said, well, we work for organizations. We're psychologists. I thought, I don't know that. So I sat down and we chatted for an hour, and they invited me down for an interview and eventually hired me. And so I finished my dissertation on a Friday and started with them on a Monday and haven't looked back.
You had cancer at a very young age?
Yeah, I was 26 or 27.
Wow.
Yeah, it was just picked up by a medical exam. I had a cough, it wouldn't go away, so I got a medical exam, and they said everything's fine except for this lump. Well, lump where? On your testicle. Well, and he said if it's on rather than in, they'll take the testicle. If it's in, and it was
rather scary for a young man. Very
scary, and went along the next few weeks with no cup of coffee necessary, until they finally did the operation and found out that it was, and gave me all sorts of radiation treatments, and then moved on with life.
How did that shape your life and career?
It speeded me up considerably.
Matured you.
It did. It realized that this can end, and you got to do something between now and the end. And when I moved to Buffalo to train graduate students, because I was waiting for my equipment for my dissertation, I put a lot of energy into that, and I worked very hard at it, and worked very hard at learning, but also worked very hard at realizing that some circumstances weren't as sophisticated as others, and I didn't want to be in those circumstances. So when I got the opportunity to talk to these guys in Massachusetts, they were very bright and very capable, and I thought, I want to work with them.
These guys being?
The company called Nordley Wilson. They're sort of in business still now. Yeah. But they had been in business 25 years when I joined them. And so I started there, and I started traveling kind of immediately. They didn't travel much, but I did. And I, at one point, traveled 240 days a year for 30 years. And went out and made things happen and learned a tremendous amount. I didn't realize how ignorant I was.
Interesting. Where was home?
Originally, New York City, though I lived in a farm in upstate New York for a period of time, then moved down to the city. And now I live in Connecticut and have lived in the same place for 40 some odd years. But
early on, you had a life's lesson that life can throw you curveballs.
Absolutely.
Has that been helpful in your work with your corporate clients?
Absolutely, because I I sometimes bring a sense of urgency that they don't have and try to communicate it to them in terms of we need to get on with things, or we need to get on with things. So I put pressure on people that I coach to try to help them get on with things and make choices in their life. And when it comes to leadership, first thing I try to teach people is it's all gray, and you need to get right with that. And if you can't get right with that, you can't be a leader. It's not black and white. It's not straightforward. It's all gray.
And the higher you are elevated, the more gray it becomes.
Absolutely.
Even in finance.
Even in finance. Exactly right. I'm working with a woman now, coaching her, who wants to be a CFO, and she's very much a good controller, very much. And she's struggling with seeing the what ifs, the grays, which is where she needs to be if she wants to be that. And she's getting there.
George, for the benefit of our viewing and listening audience, we met many, many years ago when we were both much younger versions of ourselves in the early 1980s.
43, yeah.
43 years ago.
Thereabouts.
Amazing. In Ottawa, Canada, I was a young parole officer and applying for a job that I probably didn't quite qualify me for, and you were the consultant psychologist assessing the candidates. Describe for our audience what it is you do for your clients.
Well, let's take you as an example. You'd gotten through whatever first round they had, and you were asked to fill out some materials. It was an on-paper deal. It's all online now. 8 or 9 pages, and you added 3 or 4.
This was pre-internet.
This pre-internet. That's it. It would be mailed to you in snail mail. And I happened to be in Ottawa when it came into the office, and I took a look at it, and I thought, wow, because you added 3 or 4 extra pages, good stuff, not just. And so I went into the CFO because your boss-to-be was out of town, Johnny, and I said, John, you got to take a look at this guy. And he said, he's a bleepity-bleep parole officer. I said, yes, I know he's a bleepity-bleep parole officer, but I think this guy's got something going. We ought to invite him in. So they invited him in. It was an interview, and you were hired, and you took off from there. But yeah, clients very often don't really know what they're looking for besides labels. And had an interesting experience this week. Client that we've dealt with since 1990 who used to have these very pithy one-page position descriptions. And you really could feel, you could look at it and say, I know what this person does. They sent me a 6-page position description for a lower level job with all sorts of categories, which means nobody's added leadership to that. They've just added things to this. And part of leadership is to bring things down to their essence. That's how you help your people bring it down to the essence. And they're going in the opposite direction. And it's interesting to see.
So you would assess candidates for companies for key positions.
Yes.
Key position could be CEO, it might be a vice president, it might be a manager, it might be an accountant that they really want to get right, the position.
A lot of salespeople.
Salespeople, a lot of working with salespeople. And you do the assessment and then you work with your client to try and make sense of that.
Make sense of it and then help them, once they've hired the person, to bring the person on board and manage that person in the way they need to be managed. Not necessarily in the way the manager thinks they should be managed. So trying to help them translate that into effectiveness, because that's where you get a lot of turnover. When you, first of all, don't tell the person what the job really is. It's called RJP in HR terms, realistic job preview. And when you don't do that, you're going to turn somebody over unless it just happens to be a fit. So it's like a contract. You tell them what you expect, and then you start working with them, and you measure them along those expectations, and you get feedback and give feedback and give feedback. I ask people during a feedback session all the time, what's the definition of intelligence? And they give me these flowery, and I say the definition of intelligence is the ability to get off the train track when the train is coming.
Yeah.
To see that today's problem somewhat different from yesterday's, then to do something different about it. And to do something different about it is important for 2 reasons. One, it's not a think tank. You actually have to get something done. But number 2, you get some feedback for that action. And hopefully that feedback will help you calibrate and be better tomorrow than yesterday. So in my work with people, I'm always trying to say, what are we doing tomorrow that's better than yesterday? And how are we growing from there?
What role intelligence?
Important, not only, but it's really important. Depends on the position. Okay, I've had really successful people who weren't on a testing basis super bright, but they had other characteristics. One was an entrepreneur who could literally see things and do things you and I would not do.
Right.
But mostly it's a factor, particularly in the technical arenas that I often deal in. But there's a certain level that I think is required to see the larger picture in most things. But not so. You can get a really bright person that never gets anything done.
Correct.
They're too bright for their own good. We've run into them. They everything comes so easily to them, they haven't learned how to discipline their skills.
So it's really important to have that, what an old professor used to call propitious niche, to find
yes.
a niche that accommodates your skill set, if you will.
Absolutely. It
You
is.
would not put me in an accounting role. I don't have that level of detail.
Yeah, absolutely. And I say to people all the time, you could say, George, we'll give you a $50,000 bonus if you can dunk a basketball by Monday. Well, not going to happen, guys. Not going to happen. Nor should it. Nor should George be playing that role. George has another role that he can play and be successful at and enjoy versus asking him to do something he cannot do and make him anxious all day.
I remember one time you made a comment that trees grow at different heights in the forest. And you were referring to perhaps a couple of people who may have started out together and they were both somewhat comparable in talent and skills and abilities. But 15, 20 years later, one is way up and the other is not so much. Talk to me about that. What did you mean trees grow?
Well, whether it's talent or effort or exposure, trees grow at different ways, okay? And an individual that started out here at one point, depending upon their exposure and talents, they may grow like this. And this guy here is still looking at you the way he saw you back then, and he doesn't realize that differentiation. And he's got to look at you the way you are today versus the way you were back then. And so so I get into arguments with managers all the time. But I worked with the guy 10 years ago. I get that. But look what you've done in the last 10 years, and let's look at this person's history in the last 10 years. It doesn't seem the same. And
what accounts for that, do you think, the disparity?
Some of it, and you know it better than anybody, is that internal fire. I'm going to make things happen. I'm not sitting here waiting for it to happen.
Execution.
And learning mindedness, is doggedness, okay?
My father used to use the term pluck. It was his favorite expression.
Pluck is a good term. Grit.
Grit.
Because good things and bad things are going to happen in your career. It's managing them. It's not whether it's going to happen. As I'm fond of saying, it's not always true, Daddy doesn't own the business, which means you got to go out and make it happen. It's not going to be handed to you. And so the very act of making it happen and learning grows you immensely. The larger the barrier you go after that's appropriate, the better you grow and the more you set yourself up for success going forward.
A few years ago, Gallup came out with a survey, not a survey, they probably did a survey to do the report. And it was fairly exhaustive research, as Gallup can do. And they stated that there are not a lot of good managers around,
right,
and that I think their ratio was 1 in 10 had sort of the natural ability to do this. And others, well, do something else, please, and don't manage. You agree with that?
More true than not.
Yeah.
I think that it depends on the reason you want to be a manager. What I say to managers all the time, I'll ask a question. Hey, do you get paid more than your people? And in most cases, there are some sales situations where that's not
Sure.
true. But in most cases, they do. I said, that differentiation, you get paid, you're there to provide a service for these individuals. But they work for me. No, you're getting paid to provide them a service. Are
Yes.
you providing them the service? Are you keeping up to speed? Are you giving them feedback? Are you helping them find opportunities? And most managers don't manage.
Correct.
Nice people, excellent people, people you want to have lunch with, that sort of thing. But most managers don't manage.
It's almost as if they believe it's the title and the enumeration is a reward for having done good stuff, and it's more titular and honorary.
Yes. And that was yesterday's reward. It's the way forward. That's always the issue in any career. And when they make you a manager, that's just a starting point of, okay, now it's this new skills you got to learn. And now you have a bunch of people who are in some ways dependent upon you, and you have a responsibility to them. You're in a service business.
It would be a great indoctrination program to have some onboarding for managers that taught them that, actually.
Yes.
Because so many in my experience just don't get it, have no clue.
But you've done a lot of training around that.
Yes, over the years.
Over the years you have, and trying to bring managers along, give them the sense of ownership of that. But as you know, some people take it, some people don't.
Right.
We've talked about people and think, he's so bright, why doesn't he get it?
Right.
Don't know.
Right. Interesting. AI.
AI is interesting. It's important in lots of ways. There was an article in yesterday's Wall Street Journal about AI and entry-level jobs, that they're taking away a lot of these entry-level jobs of individuals coming out of university. So number one, you're going to have to do something different to get into these organizations than you did before. But number two, AI is an excellent possible tool. Now, one of the criticisms of AI is it's inaccurate. Well, if you think of thinking, your thinking, mind thinking, creative thinking, it's partially inaccurate. Your thoughts go through stages. So what some AI specialists said, it's okay because the machine is learning how to come up with new ideas, and some of the ideas will be bunk. Just as some of your ideas and my ideas are bunk when we're trying to do a creative exercise. 2/3 of writing is editing. Okay, why? Because my first pass at the writing wasn't that good. I had to redo it. Doesn't make me a bad person, but I had to do it. So AI is a great tool, but if we look at it as the truth, you're making a mistake because it doesn't help you expand yourself and learn from this process to use it as a tool rather than as the answer. Because you see commercials on TV now, the AI thing, and the person then presents to the boss, and all of a sudden everything's great because of the little AI thing they just did. Mm-hmm. It's not going to work that way.
Right. How about leadership? What do you think makes an effective leader today? And has that changed over the years?
It's changed because I think you have to be more adaptable now. The table pounding, screaming, finger pointing at others is gone, long gone, and should be gone. It's more about collaboration, to use the term of the day, inclusiveness. It's more about seeing people as partners than subordinates. I had a client years ago who, this is an interesting story, and you know this guy, first name is Larry. Larry came into the office in his early 90s and said to his head of sales, I want to start calling our people associates, not employees. And the head of sales says, no, they work for me. And this conversation went on for 6 months. And Larry, being a nice guy, said, okay, but I could bring it up. And then his assistant was saying the same thing. He came in one day and he fired the guy, helped him find another job. And his assistant said, he said, you can go too. And she decided to stay because he was going to treat people differently. He saw that the world was changing and you needed to treat people differently, not as a top-down subordinate. And I think we need to serve people as a leader. Oft-said, not frequently done, but we need to serve people. We need to help them do what they need to do to be successful, to serve you and the organization.
I had a recent sit down with two authors, Tom Gritta and Ted Mann, who wrote the story on GE, Lights Out, Pride, Delusion, and the Fall of General Electric. Are you familiar? You may not have read the book, but
No.
are you familiar with the sort of the GE story? And
I am.
what do you think happened there?
Well, you said something yesterday that I hadn't quite put together. You said it wasn't just the most recent guy. It was the guy before that probably set it up to come crumbling down. So it takes several generations to get the crumble going. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what happened. People get cocky. You get to believe your own PR. And look, here's what I say to a new president. I say, the day you become president is the last day you heard the truth. That's number one. Your jokes are funny. It's something you used to say, okay? But so that's the first, and it's important not to be cynical. So that's the first stage. The second stage, the dangerous stage, is you begin to believe everything you say is true. I'm the president. I'm having success. Look at my numbers. It must be true. That's the dangerous stage, because you stop listening to others. You stop gathering data. You kind of believe that you have, omnipotent talents, and it ain't true, because the world's got a way of changing in front of us. So part of leadership is wanting to be a leader, having the drive to be a leader, the ambition to be a leader, but learning and serving others, but continuing to change. That enormous amount of learning is enormously important, however you do it, whether it's podcasts, reading books, whatever, get new information there. My son was telling me yesterday he's listening to a 5-hour podcast on Rome, okay? And he listens to it an hour at a time, and he's thinking about it and what he's doing. That's great.
How do we stay relevant today?
I read the Wall Street every day. Every day, not all of it, but to try to keep up with the ideas, to be able to use those examples with clients. Now, you can't come into a client and talk about pseudo-psychopathic schizophrenia. They're going to look at you like, but if you say, hey, Campbell Soup is doing this, and here's what this, or somebody else is doing this, and this is what you may consider. So you have to be able to coach or couch your information in a way that the person can relate to so they can take action on. And I think if we're not learning, we're going backwards, because it's changing very quickly. Good learning, though. There's a lot of garbage out there.
There's a lot of garbage, especially on social media.
Yes.
People making it up. And
yes.
Yeah.
Which brings us to something you and I have chatted about several times about other people, soak time. Leaders have to take in information, but they have to soak on things. The more experience they have, the more they need to dredge through that experience to come up with another answer, not just take the first answer that comes.
Reflect,
absolutely. I used to go to Beaumont, Texas, and you've been there, and they're a bunch of engineers. They're good old boys, but they're smart engineers. And I'd see a candidate, and they'd say, "What do you think?" I said, "I need to go out and swing a chicken around my head to think about this." And I'd do this move, and they'd say, "What?" But they got it. You needed to reflect. He couldn't just give you a simple answer. So now I say to clients all the time, I'm going to take this information, take it all in, and swing a chicken around my head and generate a report. It's the reflection that's important.
You may not want to pound they'll remove my comments. You do a lot of coaching.
Yes.
Should everybody have a coach?
No, not at all. I think it's something you have to have some specific places you want to go, but as importantly, you have to be ready to put the energy into it. It's not a passive activity. And you pretty early on in a coaching involvement need to have some direction of travel, because it's not just to read a book and we're smarter, but what are you doing with this information? I call it learn do. What are we learning? What are we doing? What are we learning? What are we doing? I had one fellow call me up from Seattle, and he said, "I want to coach," and I knew the guy from a client, and he said, "My last coach gave me 15 books to read." I said, "Really? 15 books? What'd you do with them all?" He He said, well, we didn't do much, but we read them. Good. So if we're going to read something, we're going to do something with it. We're going to apply it because you're going to do it differently than I'm going to do it, given your background, your experience. So we're going to learn the information, like on negotiating. I'm talking to people recently. And you're going to do that differently, given your background. So let's find how you apply it, not how George applies it.
So what makes an effective coaching session? Because a lot of people are being coached today,
Yes.
and there are coaches out there that shouldn't be coaching.
Yes.
It's like, I would say it's like guitar players, or everybody and their second cousin can play guitar, but very few play the instrument well.
Yeah, it's a good analogy. I think the coaches that simply go it by the numbers, here are our 6 goals and what we're going to do, aren't very helpful at all. Mm-hmm. They quote unquote get some things done, but they don't leave the person with a way forward, with a set of skills that they can apply when the coaching is no longer there to help them solve problems in the way forward. So it's about a commitment to the individual. It's about an understanding of their skills. It's about pushing them. I call myself a professional irritant, and I push on people. And I vector things. You know, you think of vector as a tugboat or an ocean liner. Tugboat pushes next to the ocean liner, doesn't go head on it. But I'm always pushing on someone, always pushing, until they say, George, all right, I got it. And I'm doing it because I'm rooting for them. And I tell them that. I tell them I'm a cheerleader without the pom-poms. Mm-hmm. I said to one person, if you get a big enough job, I'll buy a pair of pom-poms for you. But I refused to put the cheerleader costume on like Robin Williams did with the Dallas Cowboy cheerleader. I said, I draw the line. Unless you become president of the world, I ain't doing that.
How does the chief executive today keep relevant and with it?
Staying close to their people, hearing what they're doing, having contacts on the outside that are challenging, that are helping them grow, learning, continuing to learn, asking questions, trying stuff. Okay, most people's success is like this. It's not a straight line curve. It's only when you write your autobiography at 80 did it all seem easy. Mostly you got to keep a seatbelt on most of the time. So getting out there and trying things and failing things and learning from them and trying again. That's why many people aren't successful, because they're afraid to fail, even on the smallest things. Mm-hmm. They're so focused upon looking good rather than understanding and learning.
Since sales drives a lot of organizations, there are some that are more sales-driven than others, to be sure. You have worked a lot with salespeople. You've trained them. You've assessed them. You've talk to us a little bit about that. What makes an effective sales person?
It's a driven and competitive person. It's someone who has energy and wants to be out there, not sitting behind a desk. A person who understands the technology and really spends good time understanding the client and their requirements. This woman I deal with in Florida who's up and coming, probably the best sales leader I've ever run into. You ask her how a sale was made, she can give you chapter and verse why and how and what they did and what the next steps are and how it's going to be. It's astounding. But she went out and learned sales the hard way. She was working for a company where the sales were kind of easy, and she said, I'm not learning here. She moved to another company where you sat in a big group of chairs, and you had to make these calls and sell, and your numbers were on the wall so you could see who was winning. And it was daunting for her. She learned tremendous skills from that. And now she's bringing it to this company in Florida, and they're doing marvelously. So you've got to be willing to fail. You got to be ambitious. You got to be hardworking. You got to be self-believing. You got to have an ego. Otherwise, because you're going to get turned down. Salespeople win 2 out of 5, like a baseball player. Mm-hmm. If he hits 2 out of 5, he's an excellent baseball player. Mm-hmm. Well, he's failed 3 times. Mm-hmm. A lot of that is failure. One client in the Midwest, Jim would go past this plant twice a week, And he would stop in and hand out his business card. And he knew he wasn't going to get business because the purchasing individual, agent, was dating his competitor. But Jim would drop off his card, talk to the people. He's a nice guy. And a year later, he gets a phone call. Hey, are you Jim W? Yeah. He said, we found 50 of your cards here. We just fired the purchasing guy. Why don't you come in and talk to us? But he talked to everybody.
Persistence.
He didn't just hand the card off. He made relationships as he went, as what you do, naturally.
Tell us about the importance of relationship building, because it may be a skill that has gone by the wayside, especially with the advent of social media.
Well, you tell me, because you do that better than almost anybody I know. You do that better than I do.
Relationship building?
Yes.
Well, it takes work. It's hard work. It's hard work. It's connecting and reaching out with people. It's calling to say howdy for no particular purpose sometimes as well. And I think it's having the nuance to know what cadence you're not going to, I have a good friend who has a daughter with severe autism, and she texts me every day. Chuck, how are you? Every day. It's just, and I reply, but you wouldn't do that in a normal.
No, it's a wonderful thing to do, though.
Relationship. So it's hard work, and it's making a concentrated, deliberate attempt at staying in touch and letting people know that they count in your life, if you will.
Yeah. Well, that's a better description than I could give.
Thank you. Culture. If you read Harvard Business Review, 80-90% of the failures and acquisitions have to do with culture, and meaning a misfit of culture. Talk to us a little bit about the organizations that you've experienced that had a great cultural milieu.
Let me tell you one that sort of didn't. And my definition of culture is a very simple one: the way we do things around here.
Correct.
Okay. I was visiting a client in the West, and I walked into their boardroom. I was waiting for somebody, and on the wall they had a set of values. There were 17 different values.
Yeah. You can't even remember them.
You can't remember them. So as a leader, what would you have done if you were given those 17 values?
Well, I'd get rid of 15 of them, 14 of them.
You'd boil it down.
Yeah.
So nobody added the leadership to do that, to say, okay, I know that's important, but it's not crucial. You'd bring it down. There was no leadership. When you bring cultures together, one of the things that it's important to remember if you're the buyer is that there's some good people on this other side. And you have to be willing to take a look at them and not just say, we won, you report to us. Because that's when you turn over the good people. And it's the good people that you want to keep and hold on to. And they are going to do business differently than you. It's important for you as the purchaser to learn something about how they do things in their way. When I worked with fishermen in Prince Rupert, 900 professional fishermen, talk about a different culture.
Western Canada.
Western Canada. It's far north as you can get in Canada until you're in Alaska. The guy that headed it, at least during the second half of my involvement, was a guy named Patty Green, who's about 6 feet tall, 375 pounds, bib overalls, come into a meeting with a big knife on his belt. And if he didn't like something, he'd take the knife and jam it in the table. And turns out his father was a surgeon. So Patty was putting it on for the other fishermen, okay? But they got his attention. And they knew Patty cared for them. They knew Patty wanted them to do well. And they were Portuguese fishermen. There were all sorts of fishermen from different worlds, but they blended well around the common purpose, the overlapping circles, which is what bringing cultures together is required. It doesn't take writing great books about it. It takes understanding the actions that need to be taken to bring them together, and slowly bring them together, not just jam them together.
Jack Welch, the legendary icon of General Electric, and we are podcasting today from the Welch From the university, the College of Business and Technology, the Welch College of Business and Technology. But he used to say there are four kinds of people: the ones that make their numbers and make their values, and those were the ones that you wanted to incentivize and promote and hug and celebrate. And then there was the ones that didn't make their numbers but made the values, and you wanted to give them a second and third chance. And there were the ones that didn't make the numbers and didn't do the values. Well, that was an easy decision for Welch. You got rid of them. But he said the worst kind of employee was the one who made their numbers big time, but were dastardly when it came to the values. And he said more organizations than enough just look the other way because, it's Jack or Brenda. And they're difficult, but look at the business they bring in. And so they excuse it. Meanwhile, the values are up on the wall for window dressing.
Yes. Yeah. That kind of inauthentic behavior, when you allow that, first of all, you sit down with that high achieving person and you say, hey, we need to find a way to do those values. Those values are up there for a reason. Let's talk about what you need to do that, because we want to have you continue to be successful. But this is not going to go on this way. You need to begin to send a message. I'm occasionally invited in circumstances where people are on the locks, about to be gotten rid of. And I'm always trying to find the overlap with the individual. I had a situation once in the West. I get a phone call from an old client, and we have this guy who's a cancer on the operation. And they said various other things. And I said, why don't you fire him? And they said, well, come out and visit him. We need you to visit him. So, and it turns out, interestingly enough, I'd interviewed this guy for another client 20 years before, and I found his materials. And in the halftime notes, I don't write judgmental halftime notes. I wrote, he needs to grow up. And I thought, wow, I never write that. So I go out there and I meet with the president, and I said, I need your help. I need you to help come in there and tell the story, what you need, and then leave, and I'll take it from there. He gets into the room and starts looking around for satellites, doesn't say anything, and I think, okay, thank you very much. That was very helpful. And so this guy, the door closes, and I say, look, there's an outplacement person sitting outside. They're going to fire you today. Do you want that to happen? Well, who are you to tell me? I said, you don't understand. You're a talented guy. You're obviously a talented guy. There's a lot that you can do. So we spent 3 hours in a room. We eventually wrote a bulleted contract with them, and he stayed with the company, became a vice president. And I got close to him. He just retired recently, moved to North Dakota for some reason, but no accounting for taste. But I came in the front door, but I didn't devastate him. I helped him begin to see that there's a way forward, that he had built himself into a hole, and there's a way out of that. I don't know if I answered your question.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess my where I was going is that culture is exceptionally important, and there are leaders who can build and support a great culture.
Yes.
More often than enough, it's left to chance.
Yes.
And if you do not have values, a limited number that you work at and inculcate with just about everything you do.
So what are some of the specific values that you would do, like from when you were at Aquarion? What were some of the specific values?
We had three: respect, responsiveness, and responsibility.
Okay.
Actually, there were four. Searching for excellence was one, but that's not really a value.
Yeah.
But we had four. But I call them the 3 R's: respect, responsiveness, and responsibility. And for Aquarion at the time when I became CEO and introduced those, that made sense.
Yes.
Those values made sense.
Yes.
And then we really tried to live by that, and really tried to, with performance appraisals, that they meant something.
Yes.
And that if you violated those values, you'd be spoken to.
Yes.
And if you continued to violate those values, then you didn't belong here.
Sure.
So you really, it's been my experience that more than enough, it is window dressing.
Yes.
For organizations. So.
Oh, it absolutely is. But people know that. And credibility is everything when you're a leader. And if you do things for window dressing, you lack credibility with people.
Correct.
And you can lose it very quickly with people.
Correct. I used to know in another organization, I knew a chap who was a manager of customer service, and he used to espouse, or vice president of customer service, and he would espouse, serving the customer par excellence. And but if he ever had a customer on the phone, he could be heard just slamming it down and swearing, and so violating his own code, if you will. And it meant nothing.
Yes.
People knew that his supposed values were poppycock. So, George, for the benefit of the university setting, we are at Sacred Heart. What would you say to students as they, both undergrad and graduate students here, who are, the majority of whom are between 18 and 24 probably, as they, round out their education and begin to seek out a career? What advice would you have in 2025 and beyond?
Well, one of the characteristics I often look for when I see younger candidates is, do they know how to work? And part-time jobs, whether you need it or not, teaches a lot how to work, because it's different. I was doing a feedback with a fellow who's now a vice president of a company in Midwest, and he'd interviewed him right out of university. I did a feedback with him 6 months later, and I said, Guy, what's been the hardest transition from university to working in this company? He said, staying awake in the afternoon. Okay. Because at university, he'd do his courses and he'd go late weightlift or do whatever. It's learning how to work, because if you come in with some sort of reasonable work ethic, the opportunities will open up to you. Then it's also not being tied down to one thing. You go into an organization, other opportunities may open up for you in other areas. Explore them. Doesn't mean you have to do it. You're not holding hands and jumping off a bridge. Explore opportunities. Look at other possibilities and continue to learn. Don't necessarily have to go on for other degrees, but you have to continue to learn. The day you finish your degree is the day your education is out of date.
Mm-hmm.
It's a born-on date.
Correct. And so you begin all over again, really.
You begin all over again. I was sitting in my library upstairs. My wife came in and she said, what are you doing? I said, I'm trying to get an education. And I was reading St. Augustine's Confessions, for heaven's sake. And she said, why? I said, because it ain't done. I need to continue to learn. It's changing out there.
Every day.
Every day.
Thank you, Dr. George.
We done?
We are done. You're listening to Heart at Sacred Heart University. My guest today, Dr. George Gercken, consultant psychologist, on leadership, motivation, and the way forward.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Stay tuned for more conversations on the Heart podcasts on leadership.